Boop. So yeah, when we're looking specifically at demographics of poverty in the Valley, you can see that everyone who's flocking over here doesn't necessarily mean that people are flocking to this area to secure their livelihoods. Often we see people migrate from some of our bigger centers like Nanaimo or Victoria, simply because we're slightly more affordable in this area without someone actually having to leave South Island. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone here is thriving per se. In our region, nearly 1 in 4 children live below the poverty line. And this is actually higher than the all residents poverty rate, meaning that our kids and our youth in the community are disproportionately affected by this. And right now in Duncan, we have no youth shelter, and we have like really limited space, especially since COVID, for youth to be supported, to access resources, and to just really like hang out and be who they are. So I think if you're attending this conference, we can all agree that nature is important, healthy food is important, and a sense of place is really important too. Many urban farms, they might keep their gardens under lock and key, lots of fencing, and they might only be available under their operating hours, and that can be for good reason. But we're actually here to make a case that breaking some of those barriers and opening up your space can actually allow new bridges to be formed between you and your community. And that's super important, because we work within a food system, and as farmers and as gardeners and as people who care about food security, and that embodies a really complex web of relationships that we both exist in and depend upon simultaneously, not just for our physical health, but so many other aspects of our health as well. And each choice that we make within that web of the food system is really closely tied with other threads in the community, like community vitality, Indigenous sovereignty, sustainable economies, biodiversity on a planetary scale, so many things. So when you're trying to revive a system, the more that you make your actions accessible to others, the more strength that your outcomes will have. Personal impact can be super powerful, but really there's nothing like the force of collective action. And just because certain systems might be failing us, it doesn't mean that we have to fail each other. So with this in mind, we'd like to introduce you to our humble farm and what we do here as members of the community.
Hey, yeah, so we are a quarter acre that grows with permaculture and regenerative agricultural methods. We occupy a municipal park located in the district of North Cowichan, 2 blocks from downtown. We grow a mix of mixed vegetables, fruits, root vegetables, cole crops, leafy greens, perennial herbs, and small apple and pear orchard. We also use the park as a demonstration site for agriculture, environmental stewardship, and local food security. We put an emphasis on youth in the community, but we have a variety of demographics who use the park, whether it's for playing, for gardening, or simply walking in the space. We see all types of folks come through on a regular basis. Aside from the market garden and the food forest we work on, we also oversee the Kinsman community gardens. So it's highlighted there in that rectangle and then that square there. So the community gardens occupy quite a large portion of the space. The community gardens consists of raised box beds and a mandala style raised box beds. So in the last 2 years, we've also added 2 meadows sites at the park. So one borders the northeast corner to the right, that is to the right of the apartment complex, and it's beside the school parking lot of Cal High. And the other is in front of the retrofitted community building on that lower right corner there. We also have a passive solar greenhouse that we use to start plants, grow heat-loving plants, crop storage, potted plants, and propagate cuttings. Is also a hookup for our outdoor wash station that was added last year. We have a free pantry now, and this is a new addition to the park. We're actually going to be building it tomorrow. So it's a mutual aid pantry where folks can take what they need and leave what they can. It's run by volunteers, and we hope this resource will benefit those in the community who need it the most. So we are young folks. The staff are young folks. We are youth. And we want to teach the next generation the skills of interacting with nature with respect and in a way that symbiotically benefits the various systems. So our small team varies from 2 full-time staff members and help from part-time workers when funding is available. We grow food on a 1/4 acre, and this park would otherwise not be utilized for growing space. The food that we sell the most, the food we sell at the park is mostly sold at our stores, the Refresh Couch and Marketplace, or on site, and coop.ca. But if not, then we give it to our kitchen team, and they make some delicious food with it as well. And if we have a surplus, then we donate it to our local food bank. So we demonstrate various permaculture principles such as no-tilling, mulching, cover cropping, interplanting. And we also don't use any nasty fertilizers or pesticides. We utilize the various canopies within our food forest system. And something new this year is we've collected seeds from a few different plants, and we've tested their germination rates. Through these community connections that we forged, it's allowed us to run a diversity of programs at the park that we'll get into in our later slides. So this is a little bit of history, so I'm going to hand it to Laura. So Laura.
Hi. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a picture from 2007. And this is Kinsman Park in 2007. You can see there's a pool, and maybe you recognize that blue roofed building. That's still there, and that's now our workshop space, camp building. But back then it was the change rooms and canteen and showers for the kiddie wading pool there. Obviously, foreground in this picture. Oh yeah, who else used to take their kids swimming there? A lot of kids come up to us, or young adults come up to us and say that they used to go swimming in the park. Yeah. So foreground in this picture is one of Cowichan Green Community's kind of flagship permaculture projects in Duncan, which was the Mandala Sun Garden. And this was a big community project, involved lots of different people, neighbors. And the tiny little person there shows you the scale of this garden. It was meant to be a community garden space that would feed many families. And it did for many years. It was a very productive site. And it was kind of the touchstone or the spark that started KinPark off in the direction that it's now taken on so many different angles. But back then it was really just a community garden space in what was essentially an underused lawn area of a public park. And the municipality of North Cowichan was pretty cooperative because it was a grassroots community project. And this sparked interest in a lot of other neighbors who wanted to be growing in the space. And in 2007, 2008, there was a push for community gardens to be built. So the community gardens actually came first before the KinPark Youth Urban Farm project started. And those wooden raised beds that you saw in the corner of the park, those were there with a good team stewarding them, and it was all volunteers. And then in 2008, there was 2012, a big grant application was submitted by Judy Stafford and Heather Kay here. In the top right corner, you can see the people who were hired as a part of it's called a JCP, Job Creation Partnership grant. And so these 6 people, well, there's 8 people in that picture you see in the top right corner. From the left to the right, you have Heather and Judy, and then 6 participants who were hired for a year to build KinPark Youth Urban Farm. And the idea was to convert underused green space in downtown Duncan and Public Park, turn it into an urban farm to grow lots of food for sale. That was the intention. And if you don't mind just going back one, I just want to point out the bottom left-hand corner. You can see an example of some of the work parties that went on, building the cob bench. So that's like an Adobe type. Can you identify the person in the top left corner? Oh, I think that might be Curtis. His name is Curtis. He's a man about town. He's a landscaper now. Sorry, I don't know his last name. I think he has a landscaping company called Lunar Bloom. Anyway, but he got his start at KinPark Youth Urban Farm. These are all youth under 30 that were given charge of this project to build cob structures, to install rainwater harvesting. There was a solar water heater installed on the top of the former pool building. And you can see there were work parties with many volunteers over the course of a year, sheet mulching the lawn, bringing in spent horse manure, hay, to build the soil up in place and convert the lawn, the sod, into rich, fertile soil. And all of this was done through community consultation, which is what you see Curtis doing there, hosting a little community check-in, proposing to the neighborhood, this is the project we'd like to see here. How would you like to be involved? What kinds of things would you like to see this park become? So now you can go to the next slide. Thank you. And so again, with the support of North Cowichan Municipality and lots of neighbors and volunteers and friends, KinPark was launched 2012, 2013. You can see the beginning of the greenhouse construction here. That was a very exciting project. This is a passive solar greenhouse is really an incredible resource to have when starting seedlings in the spring, and also to overwinter things, because it's just that little bit much more insulated than a regular greenhouse. On the bottom left, you can see Thomas Mulcair visiting KinPark, and just the abundant produce that was like these 6 participants that started this program off. They really did an incredible job of filling the place up with a lot of vegetables right away. And they were taking, you can see it's mostly kale, actually, kale and Swiss chard. They were taking a lot of it for sale to the Duncan Farmers Market on a Saturday morning. So yeah, I think we can skip to the next slide. There's a little bit of history of KinPark.
Nice, thanks, Laura. So after all that work and consistent dedication over the years, farming on the space and really taking care of it, we've grown steadily, and now we tend to see pretty good results from our efforts. 2021, this year, was actually a year that we received minimal grants, but through in-kind donations and the community connections that we've forged since 2012, we still achieve a lot. With just 2 full-time staff, we recruited youth volunteers who spent over 2,400 hours on the farm. We've grown over 1,700 pounds of food from just a quarter acre. We made contact with 130 youth in the community, 222 young summer campers, 25 community gardeners, and we did some habitat restoration this year that converted 180 square meters of lawn and weeds and neglected areas in the park into native pollinator gardens. Can seem like a mouthful, but if you came to the park on a nice spring day like today, you would just see us hanging out, and this is probably something that you would see.
Blair, you might have to change the sound setting so that your sound is coming through for the video.
Okay, it's okay. It's just music.
Think of a nice jazzy tune.
Yeah.
If you have one.
Da, 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 da.
Can you pop the link in the chat?
Yeah, asparagus. So excited for asparagus.
Yeah, I should mention that a big part of the project when it was first initiated was to create permaculture gardens, and that included planting things like asparagus, and that was me chomping on the asparagus earlier. Fruit trees, like dozens of fruit trees were planted, and berry bushes. There's a huge hedge of raspberry bushes, and then the block of annual beds that are a bit more conventional rows, but the park is actually full of perennial food.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into that and show some photos. Yeah, so I wish you could hear the music because it really it just embodies the good nature of the park. It's just like good farmer vibes over there. It's simple, it's charming. People like to come hang out. We always have visitors come by, and it's just a really beautiful place to work and recreate. Let's skip ahead here. All right. So this is where a lot of that magic happens. Over the years, this space was converted from like a gravel parking lot into what you see in front of you. And this is largely because of our growing practices and the way that it started with those growing practices. We adopted a no-till method, like Lauren was mentioning, which means that any soil that's below 6 inches is just left untouched. We don't use any machinery. Any task that we're doing on the farm is typically by hand. And we really try to operate in a closed loop on the farm. So we do things like make our own compost, we raise worms on site, and those things get added as nutrients into the garden to help keep our plants thriving like they do. And we do our best to protect our soil. We cover it with mulch, cover crops. Sometimes we even leave non-aggressive weeds to just spread over the beds if we have nothing else to plant. And the reason why we do this is because protecting the soil surface means that you're helping to preserve the indigenous microorganisms that have been breeding and communing inside of the soil for many, many years now. And without those organisms, like any of the nutrients that we would add to the garden, they wouldn't be as bioavailable to the plants, because that's what microorganisms do. They make nutrients available to our plants so that they can grow and they can thrive. And so if we were all of a sudden to take a tractor and just mow it and till through this garden, we would literally be disrupting a whole ecosystem that multiple species now depend on and have been establishing for all of these years. And why would we do that? Because look at the soil that ecosystem gives us. It's crumbly, it's like brownie batter mix. It's fluffy, it's beautiful, and it smells amazing. And you know, if you're a gardener, to any gardener, that just looks like gold to you. And our topsoil has been building and regenerating like this for many years. And this one handful is so significant because it really represents resilience for our future growing food on this site. If you look towards the north and the west sides of our garden, they're surrounded, like Laura said, by perennials like trees and shrubs and perennial herbs and things like that. And if you gaze around to this polyculture, which is another concept of permaculture, you don't just plant one thing. You want to plant a diversity of plant species, because what that does is attract more biodiversity. And when you look in the understory to the canopies of these areas, you see the most biodiversity in the park here. And these perennials, they not only protect our garden because they shield us from northern winds coming in and affecting our plants, but they do such an important job of creating habitat for birds, insects, small mammals, and they provide food sources for really important pollinators that come pollinate our garden. So when you provide something like this, that's altogether food and shelter for any organism, it creates an opportunity for them to thrive and to establish multiple generations, and they'll keep coming back every year. And you can see our resident humans are also continuously coming back for more because these trees produce amazing and delicious fruits. So it's a really cool and unique spot.
All right, so what do we grow at KinPark? So the market garden is a special hot pocket of a spot where raised garden beds meet the public space. Or just garden beds. So our growing space, like I said, is a 1/4 acre, and it consists of 4 sections of beds. Raised beds are at the entrance, and then the food forest is at the back. A herb border of perennial plants separates the garden from the collection of trees that we refer to as apple alley. We grow salad greens, root vegetables such as beets, garlic, carrots, leeks, radishes, and turnips. We grow herbs, legumes like pole beans and chickpeas, brassicas, potatoes, some fruits such as apples and pears and figs and raspberries. We tried to grow flowers that we can put into our salad mixes just because they're beautiful and they're fun to eat. We practice nutrient cycling by rotating our crops throughout the growing season. And we're mindful when planting our crops for the new year, because we try not to plant the same plant in the same spot more than once a year, because we don't want to deplete the soil by constantly taking those specific nutrients that certain plants need to thrive. Like Blair was saying, we use cover crops as a way to build the soil's nitrogen, among many other benefits. So what grows well at the park? So greens are a highlight. Our salad mix is a variety of lettuces, baby kale, spinach, and bitters. When in season, we add pea shoots and flowers, and as well as other flowers like calendula, cornflowers, bean flowers, and chive blossoms. Root vegetables have had a great success at the park. Fan favorites are our carrots, our beets, our garlic, and leeks. The soil, like Blair was saying, is a gorgeous loam texture that's deeply rich in nutrients, as we practice no tilling, adding compost, amending the beds with natural fertilizers, as well as easily grown nutrients, nutrient-dense plants like comfrey. We utilize our worm bin and the worm's byproduct, like their urine and their poop, for our plants, because it's super nutritious. So herbs grow really well at the park in the food forest as they're cut back. And when we harvest them, they grow well within the layers of the canopies that mimic its natural environments. So fruit trees and shrubs also grow well at the park. We harvest apples and pears every year. Apples are usually picked with the kids' camp, and we have a blast picking the fresh fruit. And just having that connection of the kids having the kids foster that connection with their food and where that comes from, that is so special. Just seeing their faces like light up, and you can see it in their eyes. They're like, wow, I picked this apple from the tree and now I get to put it in my body. Not everyone has that opportunity. So yeah, that's really, really special to me. So yeah, in last year, in 2021, we picked 225 pounds of pears from our 2 trees. So it was a delicious harvest. So our customers have raved about our salad mixes. Last year, one customer came by the park every single week and she brought containers that she had, her clean containers, and we put our salad mix in there. So if you have a reusable container, come swing by the park and we'll fill it up for you. We also hear good things about our beets. Some of them grow so large, like honestly the size of your head, and they're not stringy, like they're so tender and delicious. And our carrots are so fresh and sweet, definitely another fan favorite. And lastly, our hardneck garlic graces us with delicious garlic scapes that we make a garlic scape pesto with, as well as the beautiful heads of garlic that we cure and we sell once they're cured. So we sell harvested to order produce, as well as a line of value added products that are made from various plants at the park, such as our pickled beets, frozen garlic products, our dried herbs, and non-edible products that are seasonally available, such as our Epsom soak herbal soap, and as well as a herbal face steam, our hand-rolled candles, and our new line of locally adapted seeds. So this is just a little beam map of what where we sell our items, and you can see it is quite closely connected. So it's all within Duncan. So these are local businesses supporting one another. So why we love the farm. So we love the farm because it is, why we love the farm. We love the farm because it's a place where you go and you pick your carrots, you interact with different community gardeners, and you enjoy the sunshine. And honestly, the labor doesn't even feel like a job. Having the ability to work outside and working on this land has been so beneficial, and I don't think I would want to do anything different. It's pure passion. Yeah, so it doesn't feel like a job, and that's why I truly love it.
Yeah. And I just want to acknowledge, we see your comments about some questions, and we will get to them in the end, especially about the challenges and things at the park. But the next thing we want to dive into is just some of the advantages that we get to experience being an urban farm, and that if you're starting an urban farm or even an urban garden, these are some of the things that you can take advantage of and are worth considering as well. So the first advantage is what's called the heat island effect. So, you know, anywhere where there's a density of pavement and concrete, it's going to be generating some heat. And I mean, that has environmental implications in terms of carbon, but a great thing that you can do to counteract that is plant a green space within those urban areas, and you can help sequester some of that carbon that, you know, the big urban jungle can kind of create. And at the same time, you can actually take advantage of this increased heat and increased microclimate that you have from an urban space. So like Lauren was mentioning on the aerial photo, you can see that we're between a school, an apartment complex, and we have a block surrounding us as well. And this gives us extra warmth and shelter to the point where we can sometimes see hazelnut blooms in January. And it's important because some of these plants, such as our fruit trees, they're almost as stressed by wind and exposure as they are to drought. So it's really important that we give them sort of a buffer for those especially sensitive species like peaches and figs and all those things that we are able to grow, so that they can establish well and thrive at the park, because we don't want to plant something and then have it die. We want to make sure that we take care of it, and that heat island effect actually does sometimes help us do that. A second huge benefit is greening up the neighborhood. This is a huge one for us because if you think about a conventionally managed urban space, you often see a lot of horsepower, a lot of fertilizer, a lot of chemical inputs, sometimes pesticides, to manage the weeds inside of a lawn. And statistically speaking, on average, urban lawns actually use more of these chemical inputs than conventional agriculture does, which is crazy to think about because we have a lot of lawns. So in our case, we don't use chemical inputs. the municipality comes to mow our lawn, the lawn that we have left, once a week at most. And this is great because within our lawn area, we have clovers, dandelions, daisies, and they all blossom and the bees go crazy over them. And the mowing really just deadheads them over and over. So they keep coming back and they keep being those food sources for these organisms. And it ends up just being beautiful. If you come to the park on a summer day, you'll see those things. And on a good year, we get to add to the green space by planting trees or planting new gardens like we did this year. And the cool thing about that is when you actively invest into a green space and you beautify it, we find that the folks living nearby, they get really inspired and they like to come over and ask some questions and they really want to do the same thing. You can see Hank over there on his apartment balcony that borders the community gardens there with his gladiolas. It's really heartwarming to see things like that because we know that the greening of the neighborhood that we're helping to do is appreciated and wanted. Now, regarding the meadows that you saw on that aerial map, these exist thanks to a partnership that we have with the Resiliency Project. And this is run by our colleague Hannah Auer, who is actually speaking at 2 p.m. today. So make sure to tune into her session as well. And Hannah does such amazing work in this community. She really is conscious about addressing the adversity that we face as humans living in an ecological crisis. And she focuses on how resilience can quietly arise within us as we set an intention and go forward with action on some of the things that are really stressful to think about sometimes. So she does this by creating these beautiful meadows all over town. And we're lucky to have 2 of them in KinPark. She's helped us to establish those 180 square meters of native pollinator gardens that we have. And through this work, again, we're creating that habitat, those food sources, and many of these plants are also important food and medicine sources for the indigenous communities in the warmland and the surrounding area. So with this, we want to embrace a duality of giving the locals a chance to observe this relationship by using these spaces to provide education and having community members from the tribes come to the park and speak upon their deep connections with these plants and with these areas. And this is something that we look forward to doing in the future with Hannah and in this upcoming year. And again, this is just a testament to the amazing work of the Resiliency Project. We had these 2 very overgrown areas in the park this year, pretty overtaken by invasive species, and some of the plants that were originally planted there got drowned out. So we recruited the help of the high school students, and both of these were done on 2 separate days, but within one afternoon in those days. So again, it's just amazing what you can accomplish with that collective action and those community connections.
All right, so Plan B now is led by Ted Leichner. So Ted Leichner has been working with KinPark for about 4 years now, and he has been educating us on pollinators such as mason bees. So he raises and cares for mason bees and installs mason bee blocks that are mounted on a box or some sort of elevated surface like a tool shed or sizable stump. These bees emerge from the holes in the tool from the holes that he's created in the tubes, and which the bees collect the pollen and then bring back to they collect the pollen from like the immediate area and then bring back that to feed their larvae as well as pollen other plants within the park. And then this is just an excerpt from Ted's site. It says, this is a little bit about Ted, observing the importance of bees to the economy of southern BC. Nothing the serious nature of bee decline. He engaged himself in a volunteer bee pollinator conservation outreach with the Canpolin researchers. His conservation activities are guided by extensive literature search and investigation to keep current on the topic. He is back to keeping bees, collecting native bees on the coast, and doing public speaking events and training workshops to garden clubs, naturalists, beekeepers, and conservation and community groups to get the bee pollinator decline story out and coach one-on-one about what can be done to save honeybees and our 400 plus bee species in BC to ensure our local capacity for pollination and seed set of flowers, fruits, nuts for decades to come. So to learn more about Ted Leichner, please check out planbnow.ca and you can check out all of the amazing things he's doing.
Alrighty. Now, pivoting a little bit towards the economic benefits that we have as an urban farm. In this photo, you're looking at all of our main markets. And what's great about growing urban is that typically you're very close to where your market is. And in our case, we never have to travel really beyond a 5-kilometer radius to deliver our food. And if you think about that, that's easily bikeable, that's easily walkable if you wanted. I'm pretty sure Laura did that for a couple of years using a tote, maybe. Yep.
A trailer.
A trailer, yeah.
Like a bike trailer, yep.
Nice, yeah. And so this allows us to reduce our emissions and it reduces our time spent delivering. And it also means that we can preserve that good freshness that comes from our veggies and along with that, the nutrition, because really on harvest day, from the time that we chop a vegetable down and we wash it and we bring it to the refresh store, for example, someone that very same day can pick it up that afternoon and go home and cook it that night. And that's maximum nutrition, that's maximum quality. And the satisfaction of that for us is just amazing. And in terms of visibility, this is important for our farm too, because we're out there, we're working in the sunshine, people are walking by, people constantly stop by to ask where we sell our food, what our growing practices are like, and sometimes they want to trade seeds or trade plants or whatever. And so in that way, the farm is kind of an advertisement for itself. And if people see you out there treating it with care and with love, then, you know, they're going to gravitate towards that. So it's a huge advantage for us as well.
Right, so the community proximity. So the community proximity of the park is with the various groups and folks that we work with and the diverse programs that we do. It's amazing to be collectively working outside where we have the ability to like co-regulate in this harmonious way. This environment is such a beautiful place, and the labor barely feels like a task. The beauty of the park is naturally captivating, and it's also the result of many hands. The park definitely wouldn't look this beautiful if we didn't have all the support that we had throughout the years. So huge shout out to everyone who's had time spent at the park and making it for what it is today. This is a quote I'm going to read here. It says, one of the things about growing in the community spaces is that you have an opportunity and a necessity to get folks involved. So to chat about our youth drop-in program, another program that we have. So youth drop-in started 3 years ago under a grant for teen girls. So it was to promote an alternative to drinking and risks of alcohol. So in the spring of 2021, the grant was complete, but we wanted to continue the program. So we shifted the intention of the program and we opened up to all genders. So anyone in the community ages 14 to 25, you can join us on Thursdays if you're interested. So every Thursday from 3:30 to 5, we host a youth drop-in, like I said, for ages 14 to 25. So young people can come and learn how to garden in an urban setting, as well as connect with others who have a green thumb, express creativity, practice their skills for wellness, and attend various workshops with guest speakers. So yeah, like learn new skills, meet new people, acquire volunteer hours. So we wanted this to be a safe space for young folks. We wanted to foster a welcoming environment where all can learn and work and connect in a natural setting. So we are based outdoors, and we do try to accommodate for like with the weather by hosting our creative or more like food making workshops here at the Couch and Green Community Headquarters. And yeah, so it's been such a fun time working with the different youth that come by. We do have repeat folks. It's just been awesome getting to know everyone, and yeah, living in the valley, gardening in urban setting.
Yeah, so another way that we work with youth is through school groups. And we've done this historically in many different capacities, but right now, for example, twice a week, we work with Cow High, which is just bordering our gardens here. So the students literally just walk over. We have an earth science class and an environmental stewardship class right now who comes to us every single week. And sometimes we do outdoor lectures, but mostly they just come to get their hands in the dirt and yeah, just help us out with farm tasks, which is helpful to us. And for them, it's really great for them because they actually get to take the environmental theory that they're working into the classroom, and they get to play those ideals out into the fields. And sometimes they get to watch that unfold before their eyes by coming to the park week after week. And some of them get really involved. We actually had a student who received a grant recently to raise butterfly cocoons in the classroom and plant a couple butterfly gardens in the park. So just a really beautiful collaboration that we have with the school district that we're going to continue. We also have a summer camp. This has been running almost since the beginning. From June until September, we have kids come Monday to Friday, and they just spend their time outside in the sunshine, exploring nature around the park, doing natural crafting, yeah, and just participating in some farm activities. They have a lot of fun. Oftentimes, kids will come super wired at the beginning of the day and maybe like squabbling with each other and super moody and, you know, fighting with each other and whatnot. But as the day goes on, you kind of just watch them get into that natural rhythm. And like Lauren said, when you're in a natural space where you actually have the space to expend energy and creativity, you get that out there, you shake it out, and then you kind of learn to co-regulate with each other. And we see that happen all the time with kids camp, and then they go home pooped and parents are happy and we're happy, and it's a lot of fun.
So the community gardens, so as you saw on that overhead shot, so we do have a good space of community gardens. So each year we rent out 25 garden plots to residents in the area. So many of our gardeners are seniors, and this year we began, or sorry, in 2021, we began building up these beds to be a two-tiered, so they're more ergonomic for these folks. So less bending, less strain on the back and whatnot. And so these gardeners have their own tool shed as well, which they can have access to for a $20 deposit. They can also store their tools in there and various gardening supplies. Our beds are currently rented for this year. They're sought after for their prime location, and a number of the gardeners actually live in the apartment complex that overlooks the park. So it's perfect. It's literally just a walk outside of right outside of their front door. So they have access, our community gardeners have access to compost and soil, a composting system, wood chips, and advice from the KinPark crew and other community gardeners. So beds are accessible, they're affordable, and they're a great way to grow plants if you don't have the space to do it at home. And it's like I said, it's a great way to connect with like-minded people. So just being transparent about our prices. So our bed rental fee for the year, it did vary from $20 for the single high board beds, and then $30 for the mandala beds, and $60 for the new updated ergonomic beds. So quite affordable. So think about like a cup of coffee. It's like what, $5? That's a couple coffees a year, and that's your full garden bed. Think of how much food you can grow in that space, right? So our gardeners are free to grow whatever they would like, as long as it's not invasive or toxic or illegal. So it's lovely to see the variety of plants grown around the park, and honestly, the creativity of the gardeners, just seeing how they like to grow their plants and all their cool tips and tricks. So yeah, like all of their beds are all unique, just like everyone. And we love the community gardening aspect of it. So yeah. So internships and mentors. Laura was going to touch on this. So Laura, please take it away.
Hi. This picture is Lauren and me and Naomi Kohawi, who I think is in this session. Hi, Naomi. And I chose this picture to show you the kind of, obviously the teamwork that goes into managing a space like this with all the different programs going on. And I think we've been very lucky over the past few years at KinPark that we've had some overlap between farm managers, and really the value of the space hi Naomi, the value of the KinPark space is, of course, that it's very visible. That's already been touched on. Locals are frequenting it all the time. But we have this really unique opportunity to mentor younger people, and through the internship structure, provide opportunities for young people who are interested in agriculture to get some experience. It's really accessible. It's low barrier to entry, and incredibly educational. So speaking for myself, when I first took on KinPark as an intern in 2017, I had done some volunteering on organic farms, and I had managed woofers, which is basically organic farm volunteers on a different farm, but I had never run my own farm before. But this is a dream that I had. And through my experience at KinPark, I learned how to manage all aspects of crops, edible landscaping, food forestry, permaculture, as well as, learning how to solicit resources from the community, coordinate work parties. And most importantly, I learned how to teach, because that's a huge thing that we do. Lauren is doing it, Blair is doing it, Naomi was doing it, and I was, we're hosting classes on a weekly basis. There's a lot of group facilitation that you quickly have to learn how to explain ecological concepts to young people, show them how to do the gardening work correctly, which, it doesn't necessarily come easily to everyone. Show them how to be gentle with little transplants, and teach them the differences between all of these different plants, the names of them, the uses for them. And to get to that point where you can easily teach while also working at the same time and juggling all that other stuff, it's a steep learning curve. But man, it was valuable for me. It really leveled me up in my life and also in my horticultural knowledge. And so I wanted to speak a little bit to the aspect of mentorship. Being a really permeable space, there's always people coming and going, and everyone has different levels of involvement, whether they're staff or volunteers or just neighbors or bystanders. Everyone's picking up a little bit just through their exposure to the space. And I guess for what it's worth, the youth empowerment and the sense of ownership that the students that are involved in our work parties and volunteers in the space, the youth drop-in, it's hugely important for mental health. It's something that I think most cities are lacking, is an opportunity for young people to have ownership over green spaces, to be able to take care of plants and feel like responsible for other living things. it's a profound opportunity with ramifications way beyond the small urban farm. We're not just producing food, we're reproducing a whole mentality. And I think that that's really one of the most valuable things. There's a question in the chat. Do you have a shareable internship program format? We hire for the internship positions, but we have volunteer opportunities for youth, and there are ways for youth who are very volunteer heavy, who are very involved in volunteering. There are ways for them to, over time, start getting paid for their work or get brought in on different grant projects. And I should mention also that even before the current youth drop-in program, way at the very beginning of KinPark, I think it was 2014 and 2015, there was a family and youth drop-in program then as well. And people were given food and snacks. There were cooking classes on site in the park. And that was for families of all ages. They could bring their kids, and the kids could hang out and be cared for while everyone worked in the garden and played on the playground and what have you. And yeah, I could talk more, but it's not for me to do that.
Thanks, Laura. So now we're going to touch on a question that was raised. Some of the challenges that we see at the park. This is inevitable when you're working in an urban space, no matter what you're doing. If you set up something that's accessible outside, you're gonna run into the community, and sometimes that's gonna present you with some adversity and it's gonna challenge you. So Lauren's gonna talk a little bit about what we see at the park, and we're gonna talk about how we approach those things.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we do see vandalism, so destruction, trash, fires, theft has been an issue during my time at the park. So just to give some examples, so we've had broken fencing, pried locks, charred grass from fires, used needles and supplies dumped throughout the park and in the gardens. We've had a destruction of one of our mason bee blocks that was just knocked down. So unfortunately, those mason bees didn't make it, and that severely impacted our pollinator rate. We've had birdhouses destroyed and used for fire. We've had our garden beds just like stomped on, signs ripped out of the ground, tomato trellises broken, our greenhouse was broken into last year. And dealing with folks that like aren't in the right minds. You're just like not sure how they're going to react. So there is challenging parts of urban farming, but we try to keep the site maintained, and we try to show that we're here and that we do care, and that we hope others can respect the space, so everyone can feel safe and enjoy the park, because that's what it's there for everyone. Yeah, so this was a pretty big fire. So that's in front of one of our new bee pollinator beds. Yeah, it's sad to see, right? You're just like, people did this not because they think it's fun, because it's a survival thing. So people are doing what they have to survive.
Yeah, I think Lauren touches upon a really important point, and this ties into our approach to these things, because sometimes we roll up to the park and after building something, it's been torn down, or we see the vandalism and fires, and it can be really disheartening at first. But, you know, at the end of the day, we exist in a system, and everything happening in the park is symbolic of a greater picture. And people who are experiencing homelessness or addiction or self-harm, they're typically experiencing a systemic failure, and we coexist in the system with them. So we can either view issues like this and maybe the people that were responsible as the problem, but when these things happen, we need to acknowledge that they have a problem, and there might be something that we can do to help solve it. If it's happening within our environment and it's affecting us, then the chances are there must be actions that we can take in the same environment to have an effect as well. So it can be a difficult thing to keep that mindset, but I think you have to. You can't let these things get you down and discourage you and stop you from doing the work, because the people who you're interacting with in this capacity often are the same people who really need these things the most. So this is an example of how we've tried to combat that. This is a project that we began this year after having a series of fires in the park in July during a succession of like 30+ degree weather. And at first we were confused as to why someone might do such a thing when the weather has been so warm and when drought risk was really high. But after digging through some of the ashes one day, I actually found some foil, and inside of it were a few small potatoes. That might have been growing from the garden. We don't know. It's possible. So that's when we realized that some of these fires are actually just hungry people using the fires to cook the food that they saw in front of them. And, you know, if you're in that situation, you would probably be opportunistic as well. So basically, we were witnessing the ripple effect of a systemic problem play out in front of our eyes. So we talked about the idea of trying to create more food accessibility in the park for people who don't have a place to process food, and maybe they wouldn't light fires in a place that is not appropriate. So we came up with the idea of a community pantry, and we actually received a grant in January to make that happen. And you see on the bottom here, these are Vancouver Island University construction trades students. They built us a cedar frame, and actually tomorrow we're teaming up with a youth group in the area and community volunteers to insulate this frame using a natural clay method. And this is important for us because for most people, a huge factor in feeling at home is having access to food within the community that you live in. And sometimes that community can be as small as KinPark, if that's the area that you frequent the most. So being able to do that in a dignified way is important. And this is the difference between something like a pantry and a food bank. So we're encouraging people to take what they need and leave what they can, while calling on our community resources to help bolster the supply of the pantry and keep it stocked. We're trying to steer away from charity, which is more of a top-down model, and we're trying to operate on a horizontal mutual aid sort of model. And this means that we act with kindness to help each other as one community. And you know, when you think about when a neighbor bakes you bread after you shoveled their walkway, or like taking turns to drive your kids to and from soccer practice with a neighbor or a friend, we're trying to foster that at-home feeling at the park and around the pantry, and hope that it's treated as such. And, you know, we hope that people feel that. And you don't want to destroy your home. You know, no one comes into their house and like wants to take a sledgehammer and just destroy it. Like something that feels like home to you, chances are you're going to protect it and you're going to care about it more. So that's kind of the approach that we take with these challenges. And this kind of brings us to something called the edge effect. This is a concept that's in permaculture, and it's actually an observed phenomenon that happens in any place where you have an ecology, even down to wetlands, wildland areas, forests. It's observed that where different mediums, climates, environments, landscapes, or communities overlap, the result is a greater diversity of life in the bordering regions. And so these edges or transition zones, they're super highly active areas with energies and materials constantly in flux. They're like an interface where ecosystems come together and allow the cycling of resources. For us, when you're starting an urban farm or a public garden or any accessible green space, you're working within that precious edge. And sometimes you become that very interface for the people, the animals, the plants, and the earth to all interact together. And if you tap into that edge effect, you open up the potential for life to thrive. And that goes all the way from humans down to the smallest microbes. And when things are thriving, there's a never-ending flow of creative expression. Each person, each plant, each organism has something to teach and is able to teach it. And each year we learn better how to interact with this land through the park, and we learn how to create the most abundant environment possible for everyone. So I'm going to turn it to Lauren to kind of close it out for us.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love this poke. I love this. That's Rocky down there. These are like friends.
Aw. Yeah, these are great folks, good photos. Just I think it's pretty telling, like just seeing these smiles of these wonderful folks, just like at the park enjoying the space. Yes, it's hard not to feel like you're lucky to be here. So KinPark, it's about educating people, especially youth, the importance of growing plants for food and to benefit the various systems. It's a lifelong job. So some questions to ask ourselves is, how can each of us contribute back to the earth and the community in a meaningful way? How can we be better stewards? How can we be better teachers? Maybe it starts with swapping seeds with a friend, maybe growing a couple plants, maybe eating the literal fruits of your labor. I don't think anything's sweeter than being nourished by something you put your hard work, your love, and your time into. Yeah. So a little bit wrap up. So this is our contact information. So please feel free to contact us. Follow us on our social medias at KinPark Farm and KP Youth, or give us a call, and we would love to chat with you. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. We really appreciate your presence here, and yeah, we're happy to answer any questions you guys have to the best of our abilities. So
Yeah, see what we have. Danny, how much time do we have for questions?
You've got about 10-15 minutes.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, what soil do you use to start your seedlings? Have you found any closed loop or peat-free alternatives?
yeah, good question. So we've been sourcing our soil from Fisher Road Compost, and we get actually 5 yards, so a full truck full donated every year, so or a couple times a year, kind of depending on their availability. And we use that and we top dress our beds. We make nice, neat beds, and we amend the soil if needed, but we generally just kind of put plants in the ground, and plants just kind of want to grow. But like we mentioned before, we've been using the permaculture techniques throughout the years, and that has heavily built up the soil with the nutrients. So just adding good things and not introducing like nasty chemicals or anything like that. That's like honestly the real key. Yeah, hopefully that suffices for maybe Laura.
Could I address
Please.
the closed loop or peat-free alternatives?
Yeah.
Part of that question. So starting seedlings requires a kind of a sterile medium to prevent damping off. And that's really hard to achieve with the compost that we produce on site. It's not sterile. So we don't start our seedlings in our homemade compost. And there's still a reliance on like ProMix, like peat-based medium. There was a period of time where we were getting really good donations of coconut coir, which was fantastic for starting seedlings in. I think if you have access to coconut coir, you should definitely get it. And I recommend screening it so you get the big chunks out. And that's an excellent sterile medium to start your seeds in, but there's no nutrition in that. So if you want to add compost, then again, closed loop, the best we have is a worm bin. So we do vermicomposting with varying levels of success. But the vermicompost is a really good thing if you want to mix in with your coconut coir, if you're trying to make your own seed starting mix at home without using peat. Get on the worm bin.
Yeah, worm bins are awesome. They are so happy with all like the kale we feed them, and like they love the beets, and it's fun because the kids kind of get like overly excited about worms, but honestly, like when you hold a worm in your hand, you're like, Yeah, this makes sense. This, I would be excited about this too. Yeah, so to answer the other question that we have, so other closed loop strategies that we've been able to integrate, seed starting approaches. So yeah, like Laura mentioned, we do have to unfortunately use ProMix. We do rely on that, but we do reuse pots. We have lots of pots that we have in our solar greenhouse. So yeah, we just wash them up, we sanitize them, and as long as they're not cracked and like falling apart, we definitely reuse them. We don't, yeah, we have to use our farmer ingenuity sometimes. So maybe put two pots together if something's, or egg cartons, or make little paper pots. We do that craft with the kids camp as well. Other closed loop things, yeah, we do, so we have a cold compost, which if, Blair, would you like to explain our cold compost system?
Sure. Yeah. So, cold compost and hot compost. So hot compost is something that a municipality might adopt, and that's usually either adding heat to the process, which actually sterilizes the compost and kind of kills like the probiotics, if you will, that are really good inside of the compost, or it means a very intensive schedule of constantly flipping that compost so that you generate a lot of heat. For us, because we have such a large scale of compost, and it's not really doable for us to be flipping it that much, we just do a cold compost. And what that means is that we just let it sit for a very long time. And we make sure to, when we're flipping, to relocate different ages of the veggie scraps that we use so that we can identify what's actually been aged so that we can use that inside of the garden. So we kind of do that work all on our own. Another thing, I guess, yeah, if we're looking outside of the greenhouse, like I would say the cover cropping is a huge part of that, and covering the soil, because when we end things at the end of the year, we have an ethos of like no bare soil, like as much as we can. And sometimes we use coffee sacks from a local roaster. Sometimes we use mulches, and sometimes we use cover crops. So we'll plant some of our cover crops in the fall, and that allows them to grow enough foliage to be able to cover the beds. And what that does is, so you're not going to get soil erosion. That's one, because we have a very, very rainy season here in the winter. And if you leave your beds nice and bare, chances are like you're going to get some washing out of soil and washing out of nutrients that are really important to stay there. And also those microorganisms that we talked about, because in the fall and in the winter is where a lot of those microbes do their work. So it's important to put them to bed properly, to cover them so that they're protected from the torrential rains and the frost, so that they're generating those fresh nutrients for us to be able to seed inside. And also, I guess like another closed loop thing you could do is seed saving. You can tie that into it, because if you have seeds that are adapted to your climate, chances are they're going to have less of a struggle with, you know, humidity issues. So if they're grown here in a place that's very humid, then if you've grown plants and saved seed from plants that year after year have dealt with humidity and dealt with lots of rains and some of those adversities, then you know you have a much more resilient plant as a result. So sourcing your seeds locally as much as possible, sourcing them yourself as much as possible, can be really important to starting those seeds and having them be vigorous and successful. Would micro clover be an appropriate? I'm not sure about what is micro clover. Microgreens clover, maybe? But yes, clover.
Tiny little leaves.
Okay. Yeah, so we do use clover, but yes, it's a legume. So it's very nitrogen fixing. It's great for the soil. It can be very vigorous. So when you do plant it, sometimes you have to maintain it. Like we had to cut ours right before winter, I think, just because it was getting a little bit out of hand. So we did a little bit of like a mow with like a whippersnipper. But yeah, so little chop and drop, yeah. and that's what they're for, right? Like once they're done growing and once you're ready to put your seeds inside the garden, you can just chop and drop that type of stuff, and you know, it might come back a little bit. That's totally fine. Just keep chopping and dropping it. It's going to break down, go back into the soil and feed your plants. So
I would say about clover, it has a tendency to creep in and stay really close to the ground. So it's harder to get with the whippersnipper. I would probably be more likely to use something that grows a little, that has a bit more of an upright habit if you want to do.
yeah, like chickpeas are great. That's something that we use that's more upright.
Buckwheat.
Yeah,
Buckwheat is good.
buckwheat for sure. Yeah, raised beds, you can treat raised beds like, if you're talking about it like a container bed, you can treat them the exact same way you would treat in-ground stuff. There's no reason why you can't cover crop or experiment with some of the practices like the no-till, no-dig practices that we're using in the ground. You can do that in containers as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a comment that microclover can be added to grass seed to increase drought tolerance, I think. It's very expensive. Yeah, you can definitely use them. You can use a mix of some of these cover crops as a lawn, and they will make your lawns more resilient if you want to have a lawn. And of course, they're going to bloom and they're going to feed those bees. So using mixes in any sort of setting that you feel is appropriate, it adds that biodiversity. And like we said, those polycultures, that biodiversity, it's really important for resilience on your site. So great ideas there. I saw a question about vertical farming. I don't know if I should answer this because I have a very strong opinion about it. Laura, did you have any comments?
Vertical farming is really hip right now. I think it's really appealing to people who live in the cities. Urban sites, urban spaces are growing vertically more than horizontally now, right? So we have a lot of vertical space to work with. And so I understand why the whole concept of vertical farming has become more and more popular. But it's also really energy intensive, and plants need soil. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
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 Soil,
like,
if you can vertically farm with soil, that means you're basically taking soil that could have been sitting on the ground and stacking it up high. You're going to have a lot of issues trying to manage the soil in a tube or a tower. One of the most effective ways that people are producing food vertically right now is hydroponically, which is very energy intensive. You're basically mining nutrients from elsewhere and bringing it in to feed your plants in your tower. So it's a bit of a false economy. And I'll let Blair speak more to it, but vertical farming is like kind of cool.
Is it the best for the environment though? Yeah, no, I'm just gonna come out and say, no, absolutely not. Well, everything that Laura said is correct. Like you're taking a lot of inputs and you're putting it inside your system. And not only that, but you're not outputting anything. You're not adding to the ecology of the earth that very much needs us to help steward some of these spaces and regenerate some of the soil and support some of these species that we're losing. So, you know, you're taking from the earth, you're mining these resources, and there's the only output that you have is, yes, you're feeding people, which is, you know, great, that's important. But yeah, I just think there's better ways to do this without spending so much energy on electricity, on ambient temperature control, on, you know, like fertigation and things like that. So it's a lot of water. It's a lot of liquid nutrients that are going into there. You know, it's basically, a lot of it is kind of conventional agriculture style, just indoors and stacked on top of each other like a bookshelf. And I don't know, I think if anyone's been to a vertical farm, there's a very different energy that you get from walking into a vertical farm warehouse than a thriving farm in the sunshine, in the fresh air, where there's animals and there's sounds and, you know, there's smells. Like you kind of feel more of an affinity towards those outdoor spaces, in my opinion. And yeah, again, that accessibility to people to be able to see the growing space. I think it's more beneficial to have it outside, to have it more accessible, to be using less inputs, trying to create closed loops and trying to regenerate the spaces that you're growing into and give back to everything that's it's giving to you. So great idea. Until I see it executed in a very innovative way that maybe addresses some of these things that we've said, not super on board with it as a farmer, as a regenerative farmer especially. Do you have any comment?
No, I don't have any comments about vertical farming. I've only seen successful like hydroponics and like aquaponics, but it does seem like a lot of work, and there obviously are pros and cons to each kind of way of farming. We personally don't do vertical farming at KinPark, but I will say we do have potato towers. So it's just pieces of lumber that are like screwed together. So it's like a box, and it's a little bit of a vertical space where potatoes can grow. But that's kind of the extent of vertical farming at KinPark. Yeah, I'm gonna check if there is any other questions. I'm not seeing any other questions. If you have any other questions, we would love to answer. I think we have a couple minutes, but other than that, I think we're just wrapping it up.
All right. Yeah, send in any of those questions. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And it was nice as someone who's only been with CGC for 6 months to learn the history of KinPark. You got everyone who's here. You'll have like 7 minutes till the next session starts. We will be doing presentations for anything that's related to food systems and food security. There's about 6 of them. They're all short and they'll go one after another. And then we'll do questions for that afterwards. And then there's some workshops in the afternoon as well. And then our keynote speaker, and then our optional networking session. So yeah, thanks everyone. And just a reminder, click the button at the bottom that says end webinar for yourself to be brought back out to the lobby, and then you can join in on the other session. So yeah, unless anyone has any additional questions.
Awesome. Thanks everyone.
Thank you,
I hope everyone
everyone.
has a great day.
Enjoy that sunshine.
Yes, it is very nice out today.